Well, welcome to Charlotte, North Carolina and the NASCAR Hall of Fame. We are here in the Hall of Honor, and I can't think of a more appropriate location to have a discussion about NASCAR and kind of the direction it's heading. This room is more special than any other room. This is where the 61 members of the NASCAR Hall of Fame are enshrined. So it's taken 75 years to get to this point, the history, everything we've seen, and we're kind of talk and just have a conversation about what we think is next. For that reason, we had to put together an esteemed group of experts in NASCAR. William Byron, driver for Hendrick Motorsports. Next to William, we have John Probst, NASCAR Senior Vice President, Chief Racing Development Officer. Travis Geisler, Team Penske, NASCAR Competition Director. Next to Travis, we have Elton Sawyer, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition. To my left, we have Christopher Bell, driver for Joe Gibbs Racing. First of all, thank you. Appreciate y'all being here. As I mentioned, 75 years of history are in this building. So I'm gonna jump off of the topic that's been debated for 75 years because it kind of controls the lifeblood, in my opinion, of NASCAR, and that's the schedule. We're at 36 races, and of the 36, we have 6 speedway races or drafting tracks, 6 road courses, a street course. We kind of have it all. So, Byron, I'll start with you. What's your opinion on the schedule, the mix of tracks, and what makes up our 36 weeks?
For me, I feel like 36 weeks it's a lot. Like it's a grind for all of us, for the team guys, and you throw a couple exhibition races in there. You know, I think that the balance is good. I've enjoyed having some more road courses. I think the street race was awesome this year. I really enjoyed that, the spectacle of it. And selfishly, I think 32 events would be a good number for, I feel like, but I do like how we've started to go to more one-time venues and mix up the schedule and not have so many, 2 weekends at a Richmond or a Pocono. It makes those races more special. Like Pocono to me has gotten way more special. So that's kind of what I look at.
So you agreed, Travis, with one race at a venue from a guy that's in charge of preparing the cars. What do you think visiting each track maybe only once? We've seen that, Pocono, New Hampshire, Michigan now?
It's a little bit more complicated because you have more unique venues to prepare for, so you're not quite as dialed in when you go back for the second race. But I think anytime you only do it once, there's a lot more variability in that event because you're not as dialed in. When you go back the second time, when you think about kind of the old schedule when we were both kind of racing, I guess, Pocono was close. You went within 5 weeks of each other, and when you went back, it was, man, everybody was so dialed in, there wasn't enough disparity in the field to be a good race. So I think from the car side of it, only going once helps us. But I think from the fan perspective, Pocono crowd was incredible. Like, I haven't seen a crowd like that there in 20 years. I'm a big fan of the one events. I'm a big fan of figuring out however many races we need to hit the right markets the right amount of times. It's probably an opportunity to hit some places every once in a while. So
what do you mean by that?
Iowa needs a race.
Yeah.
But they don't need a race every year. They don't need 2 of them. They don't need to get burned out. So what if we go to Iowa once every 3 years? Pick some places that are maybe smaller markets or just more niche markets that don't get hit every year and just rotate a race to them. That freshness of the schedule is really important, and it's very different. It's a lot more fresh now than it was before. We used to hit the same grind. I knew when my kid's birthday was based on what race we were going to. It messed up my anniversary, all that stuff now. So I do applaud that change.
Letarte, you remember talking to me at the Charlotte airport a couple years ago?
Yes.
We were talking about that exact same thing.
Right.
And I was like, probably, 3 or 4 years into my NASCAR career, and I'm like, man, it just feels like we're just on rinse and repeat every single year.
I think we all agree that moving around the country is great because we see different fan bases, but what about the venues? We have a street race at Chicago that had the worst weather perhaps known to man, yet still was amazing. Crowds were huge. And I can't say I've ever been personally to the Coliseum, but on TV it looks great. What is the challenge of those different venues versus when you do go tried and true to a track you kind of know?
Yeah, I think if you back up our 75-year history and to Christopher's point and Travis as well, it used to be a grind. We went to Daytona, we went to Rockingham, we went to Richmond, and we did that repeatedly. I think you have to give Ben Kennedy a lot of credit in the fact that he has been very open about moving the schedule around. You mentioned the Coliseum. Year 1 was tremendous out there. Year 2, was not quite there, which kind of goes back to Travis's point. Maybe we hit those venues once or maybe twice to kind of mix the schedule up. But I think we're getting that now. I think we've got a good mix at the moment. You mentioned Chicago, with everything that we had going on in Chicago, monsoon. Thought these guys here, the drivers, they did a great job. A lot of buzz, a lot of energy around that event. So hopefully it'll repeat next year.
So it's easy to all agree then, but so what are the negatives, right? Because you hear, like what's too far? Like temporary trek? Could we run the Coliseum as a points race in the middle of the year? Like what's your comfort to go there, I guess, as a driver, right?
I personally like the playoffs being the Wrigley Field type racetracks, like Darlington, Watkins Glen could be one. Like I think those tracks, that's like, in a competition standpoint, that's like, okay, you bring your best and this is where it shows. Everyone agrees that Darlington's like best drivers, best teams, car. So I think that's a really good test to start the playoffs. And I think the more we can have that in the playoffs, I think the Charlotte Oval's gotten a lot better to where that's a true test. Like the 600, whoever wins that race or whoever wins on the oval there is that's an earned win. So I think the playoffs should be really authentic to our brand and who we are. And then we try to find those venues throughout the year that the fans really want us to be at.
I know, it's not a con necessarily, but if you look at NASCAR and the variety of different tracks we race on, one of the challenges we do have is probably no other series in the world has is, we got to make a car that can handle all of that, and largely, with the new car. Now we do that with essentially one set of hardware. So not a con, it's actually a pretty cool challenge because I think, it challenges Travis and the folks on his team, the engineers on his team to use all of their intellectual horsepower to actually set the car up for all those different track types. And then it's up to, William and Christopher to take that and actually perform on the racetrack.
So what I'm hearing is we're good with variety. We're not afraid to change new things, right? The car can go to all that. We like some consistency in the playoffs. But now let's lay out the season, right? What is history we have to stick with, and what are we allowed to change? Because now listen, Daytona 500, I think there's no reason to discuss, right? We all know what that is. I'm willing to say it doesn't have to be the first race, but it's the Daytona 500 is the Daytona 500. So now, what's the mix, right? If we run different races all year long, how many road courses do you need in the playoffs? How many super speedways do you need in the playoffs? Does the playoffs need to be, what kind of look does that need to have versus the regular season?
Yeah, honestly, I never thought about the tracks in the playoffs until William said that about, having the Wrigley-style tracks. And I think that's something that I agree with and never even thought about. So, me personally, I would like to get rid of Talladega in the playoffs, but I'm sure that's not going to happen, and it creates a lot of drama. But, William, you said 32 races, so do you shorten the season, or do you like the February 15th to November whatever and just give you more off weeks?
It's a question for these guys. I don't know. I personally feel like going up against football is tough, but I would like a little more spacing in our season, like a little less saturation maybe in some points of the year, just because I feel like it'd bring the fan interest up a little bit to have that something to look forward to, like a couple weeks to prepare.
Well,
to
I think some is how we
somewhere.
track as well,
Yeah.
right? Because if we pop over to a different area of the country, I think it feels anyway, or for me, it feels like there's this entertainment or excitement, like it's a new area that we haven't seen as much.
Yeah, there's a period where we hammer that kind of Tennessee, Virginia crowd because of Bristol, Richmond, Martinsville. We kind of draw all from the same there, so you got to be very careful to draw from different areas. But then when you look at a season that's as long as ours is, you start to have some real weather issues.
Yeah, you got to play the
There's only
seasons.
so many places we can race in February consistently, and we've pushed the envelope there. We've raced Atlanta in February, and it's on the edge of what you could do, but it's just a part of it. The other thing that, this is outside of kind of any expertise I have at all, but I have to assume from a venue perspective, only having one race a year, when you have a venue that is so specific built for a sport, the way a lot of our venues are. This isn't a football stadium that can be a soccer stadium next week. It can be you can have Taylor Swift there the next week. You can have, these are really specific, and there is some overhead to keeping all that stuff operating. So I think you got to be a little bit realistic on just who can make racetracks happen.
Well, so to your point, you mentioned going to Iowa. There are tracks we go to now, or excuse me, there are tracks we don't go to now that are trying to stay open. So when we talk about variation of schedule, like what's too much? You know, with travel being as easy as it is, it's way easier now than 30 years ago. Is it time to go back to Mexico or north to Montreal or to any other venue or area? Is it time? And as drivers, I'm gonna start with the drivers because you have the fan base. Like, no offense, Travis, nobody's cheering us on.
Nobody's coming to
They're
watch
cheering
me.
you two on. So does international, I guess, does this excite you? Do you think that's an opportunity, or you think there's areas in the U.S. we could go?
I mean, well, first off, I completely agree with Travis's statement of like going to different venues. And if we go to international, that's just gonna open up the markets even more. You know, Mosport, you went to Mosport.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was amazing. Like, I love the track, love the fan base there. So I'm all for it. It's probably a little bit tougher to ship cars there, but
Yeah.
we do 3 races on the West Coast back to back to back, so.
I think a race in Canada would be really cool. I meet a lot of Canadian fans when you go up to some of those late model races up in Michigan and Wisconsin, and I think it would be really fun to
We
have
play the
something.
Canadian national anthem
Yeah.
at our races in the U.S. There's that many people from Canada that are supporting our sport when we get up near the border. We probably ought to give them something. I think they've earned it with their attendance.
Let's talk about specifically the street course. What is, like, I watched IndyCar go to Nashville. We went to Chicago. There's been some long-standing street courses out there. I thought Chicago was way racier than I thought it was going to be. I knew the event was going to be huge, but the track, I thought, put on a better race than street courses have.
I'm completely in agreement on that. Like, I think all of us were a little bit apprehensive on what was going to transpire. And whenever we got out for practice, I don't know what you did, but I was like 70%, 80%, like, don't make a mistake. And then you're like, man, you can actually push the brake zones pretty hard. The street had grip. In the simulator, it was super rough. I don't know if yours was the same way.
It was.
But then when you got on the track, like, it wasn't much different than any other place. And there were plenty of passing opportunities. The only thing was, if you had a brake problem, you were going to be in trouble.
I was surprised how well the tires worked there. Like the tire packs, like there's several of you that got into the tire packs and you're like, oh, their day's over. Get pulled out, keep going, don't even come to pit road.
That is true. Like, KB hit hard. He hit really hard and he got away with it.
I feel like we went there expecting a really cool event. Like, there's gonna be concerts, there's gonna be all this cool event stuff in kind of this race that happens. And with the weather that happened, the event stuff fell apart. Like, you just couldn't do it. But the race was like,
It's still a
this
good
is
energy.
pretty cool, you know? And I spotted from, I don't know, it was like the Opry House or whatever. We're watching people come up to the fence. And you know, those are people who had never seen the race. They had no intention of going to the race, but they were there. And I started thinking about how easy it is in that urban environment to bring in tons of new people, because they don't need to do a whole weekend RV rental. They don't have to travel from a long way away, commit their whole weekend, plan their kids' sports around. They just showed up for a couple hours, checked it out, and went home. And that's good enough for us.
I think as the ticket sale was unfolding, as we were getting closer, like 82% of the tickets that were sold were brand new fans. They'd never been to a NASCAR race before. And to your point, I think we all went there thinking this is going to be a great event. We'd never run our cars on a street course before, so I don't think any of us really knew what the race would look like. But to Travis's point, obviously we didn't really have a choice. When everything else happened, we had to put on a great race, and thought you guys did. It was
We're not
good.
going to talk Chicago without having this conversation then. A guy comes in from overseas and wins, and it's fast. Obviously, the car has connected that a lot more than it ever has. What was your opinion on SVG winning?
That's a little embarrassing. I mean, for me, I think, no, it was amazing what he did. I mean, I think that was, I was like, man, I got some work to do. Like, I got some work to do on road courses and just working on braking, shifting, all those things. And I think it was cool because it shows that our car is universal. And what I like is now it's bringing those guys in internationally, and they feel like they can be competitive. And I think that's a really good way to measure the talent level in the Cup Series, is have international guys. Like, I thought Indy was really, really good because you had all those guys and everyone was like amped up, like they were gonna, go win the race. And And that was cool. Like, you didn't have that with the old car. You know, I think getting those guys on some ovals and some other road courses, it would be good to see how they do.
Yeah, I think just getting more guys into our sport, more guys or more NASCAR guys going other places is a win-win for everybody.
I think that some of those, maybe those street courses or somewhere, we should be able to link up with those guys and run with the IndyCar series or run with some other series just to have some kind of cross-pollination of fans and give people a little bit of a different taste for things. You know, I know, like, to go run street course takes a tremendous amount of logistical planning and money to make all that happen, to shut a city down. Why not knock out 2 events?
You know, it's interesting, right? You go to the street course and you think, well, we'll just take the road course package there, no big deal, car will be ready to go. And then you hear, you know, just stuff you don't expect, right? We had to put exhaust on the car, you know, mufflers, and I know we still have some work to do to keep these guys cool, and we're working on that. You know, just as you add these, it's like you get into them, and to Travis's point, right? Like the unexpected, man, I didn't think of that, or I didn't think of this, and like it's good learning too, because now you can take it and apply it to future potential street races.
Well, we had some great discussion in here at the Hall of Fame. You keep the conversation going on social media, and for the final part, tune into NASCAR's YouTube channel.